Okay, so Pastor Darren, I feel like lately I've been talking to men, and when this issue of being holistically pro-life comes up, they kind of like backpedal a little bit. And the one phrase I hear all the time, well, I mean, I'm not a woman.
Yeah.
And so then all of a sudden they kind of get nervous about voicing their thoughts, which also makes it so that they're nervous to even get involved in the movement in some way. I've interviewed a couple of guys for positions at our office, and so I've just noticed that a little bit lately. And these are like Christians that have, So what do you think that hesitancy, I want to talk to you about some ideas how men can get in the movement practically. But before we even go there, like, what do you think the hesitancy with men in general of like being nervous to jump in, and how can they like get around that? Like, you're a guy, so tell me, how can I help them in this way?
One of the things I found out with young men is that many of them have not had the opportunity to witness what I call the role of a man. There's so many times they've been, they've been raised in certain households, or not even about a single mom household. It's just the fact that they have not seen enough men. And so therefore they're afraid to be the man but inside they want to be the man. They just don't know how to be the man because they've never really seen the man. And I think one of the big things is that we've got to find seasoned men to come alongside these other young men and say it's okay to be a man. It's okay to feel a certain way, and it's okay to stand, because kids will go out and young men will go out and they'll stand for these other things and stand. And basically what young men do, you'll notice, they go with the group. And then whatever the group influence is, they'll just follow the group. But a lot of times in their heart, they don't want to be with the group. They really want to be their own man, but they don't know how to do that yet. And so sometimes they just need reinforcement to know it's okay to be what you are and what God's called you to be.
Right. Like, I think that it's just an issue that can be triggering for some people. Yeah. Like, some people do get really upset about pro-life and pro-choice and all of that. And so maybe they just need permission, like you just said, to say it's okay for you to have a voice. I know when you look at the top 5 reasons why women have abortions,
Sure.
One of them it has to do with the guy, with the man. And so they do have they have an influence in what that decision-making process is. And how amazing would it be if more men in the world stood up, even as fathers of the baby, to say, even if we're not together, and me and this baby mom are not in a relationship, but I am going to step forward and be a dad to this child. But I think I've noticed that a lot of the dads, they never had dads themselves, just like what you were just saying. Like, they don't know even practically what that looks like. But I agree, really it kind of comes down to discipleship, right? Like, going back to the basics.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. As a pastor and serving with an underserved community, I find that all the time. And sometimes, and I'll give you a couple examples. I had a young man one time, we went out to lunch, and when we got to the restaurant, he didn't know what to do. And I was like, "You okay?" He says, "Pastor, I've never been to a restaurant with a menu." And he was 19 years old. And other times they just never have had life experiences. So they just had never had an opportunity to see. They've been in survival mode. They've been using instinctive behavior most of their life. And I think that's where the church has to come up with, you said discipleship, and I love your Embrace Legacy program. Because you were doing Embrace Grace for the women, but when you brought Embrace Legacy on, it really started dealing with these single dads. It was such a great program. And as we began to look at it at our church, I'm like, wait a minute, what about these young men that aren't dads yet? I want them to be ready for when they become a father. The hope is they marry first, but if they do become a father, I want them to embrace what they are and who they are, and made in the likeness and image of God.
That's so good.
And so we've started to just spend time with them, not so much on the aspect of, okay, this is what you need to be a dad. These are the parts of you of how to be a man. And when they're just around other men and have opportunities, and letting someone know that they can I share something with you that happened this past Sunday? And so this past Sunday, God led me to do a message on Gideon. And everybody knows the story of Gideon. He had this big army of 22,000 and God carved it down to 300. And so Sunday I looked up, and there's all these young men at church. I had never seen some of these young men before. They were invited by other people. And so I'm a big demonstrative pastor. So we have a big demonstration. I said, I need all my young men up here. People probably thought I was crazy. So I got all these young guys up there and I'm talking the story of Gideon. And so I said, okay, we got to carve this army down. So the first thing we're going to do is take a journey. So I actually run around the sanctuary. And so
You literally ran.
I literally ran around the sanctuary.
Love it.
We came to the front.
That's a charismatic church.
Charismatic church. And we got to the front, and I said, okay, so now we got to carve this army down. I said, I know everybody's probably tired and thirsty, so you got to get some water. And so in the middle of it, I said, because God's going to anoint some of us. And in the middle of this message, this kid says, never been to the church in his life. He says, what does it mean to be anointed? And so many pastors would have said, well, no, I'll talk to you later. No, I stopped the message. I says, we're going to explain to you what anointed is, because that's the same question the others had, but this is the bigger part. So they go, I said, so they had to go get water. Now, I did not give them any clues. I didn't tell them anything about the story of Gideon. Most of the people that were there got on their knees and they started lapping like a dog. That young man got on his knees and cupped his hands like Gideon's men. And I was like, oh my God. And I said, I stopped the message. I said, you got it. And so the other guy next to him looked at him and says, oh, okay, I'm going to get it too. And he did the right thing.
Oh, that's how you do it.
And so the irony of it was, he wasn't I'm not going to go into his past or what his issues were, but it impressed me so much. I said, God is still the same. And so these young men just need an opportunity, those 300 Gideon had, to go out there and fight. And one of the other young men asked me, he says, well, Pastor, how come I didn't get chosen in the 300? I says, because your job is to do what the other men did, is make sure the enemy doesn't escape. So it's teaching these young men the different roles they have. But I'm going to be honest, the one that did it would have been my last
guess.
I thought it was one of the guys that come to church and
Right.
that even knew the story.
Wow.
But he was the one that did it. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so I think it's all about, these young men are hungry for a dad. They're hungry for a father. They're hungry, and they just need men to step up and show.
Well, what does that look like practically? Like, how have you seen it look where a man disciples or takes a younger man under his wing, and whether he's a dad or a future dad, like you were just saying, what does that look like?
Yeah, I think the first thing it is, I use the God scenario, relationship. I just build a relationship. And I tell my men at the church, let's just go build a relationship. So one of the first things I do, I say, what do you like to do? What are your hobbies? What gets you? And it could be something I'm polar opposite of, but I start to do that first. And with that being said, once we build the trust, because most of these young men, they don't trust.
Yeah.
But if you build trust, you then can build that relationship. But I tell our mentors and our men that work with men, one of the key things is you can't let them down. You've got to be there. And if you can only do it once a month, you can only do it once a month. But I believe that these young men are looking for guidance. And actually, I think they're looking for discipline too.
Yeah.
Because we look at them being undisciplined, but I think they want to be tamed again. I think they want to be disciplined.
So there was this Embrace Grace Mom, which, Embrace Grace, it's support groups for single and pregnant young women, which you have at your church too, which we're so thankful to partner with you on that. But so the very first one was back in 2008 at my church when it first started. And so her baby dad, now they're married and they're doing so amazing. They're involved in the church, like all that. But she had told me that, and I never knew this until like 10 years later, but she had told me that her now husband, who was the baby dad, and they were only 16 and 17 when they got pregnant, that he had a dream of working like construction, but like really craftsmanship. But he didn't really know how to. He didn't have the finances to do any kind of official schooling or anything that had to do with that. And that there was a man at the church who had a construction company. And he had found out about this single dad at our church because they weren't married at the time. And he felt like the Lord told him to hire him, even though he had no like credentials or background or history. He was a kid. But to take him under his wing and not just hire him and give him a job with a paycheck, but also to disciple him spiritually and to help him practically with knowing how to be a dad, but then also teaching him the skill and the trade. And he like took him under his wing, and this guy never had a dad himself. And so he became like a father figure. And now he has a super successful, his own company where he's like remodeling houses, remodeling kitchens, all kinds of stuff. And he's such a great dad.
Yeah.
Such a great dad and such a great husband to his wife. And a big part of that was because someone took the time, and he could have been like, I don't have time. I got my own company, you know, my construction guy. I don't have time to pour into someone else. But he made that a priority, and it changed this guy's life.
Yeah, that's important. I got a call a year ago from a young man, and I had not heard from him since he was, oh my God, a little youngster in high school. And he just said, I called to just tell you thank you. And I was like, okay. And so fast forward, my wife and I were in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And so I have not seen this young man in many, many years. I've never met his wife, and I've never seen, he has 4 children that are, the oldest one's going into the like teen years. So that's how long it's been. And we were attending a church, my wife and I was just an associate elder. But I knew that they had a single mom in the household. So all the time, his sisters would come to our house all the time, spend the night. We took them places, did things. I didn't think nothing about it, but I'm just helping out and being a good guy. He called me, and actually we had the same conversation in Grand Rapids. He says, all of this is because of you and your wife. I says, pardon me? Because I was shocked. I said, what? He says, Pastor, he said, Darren, called me Darren. He said, I never saw a dad. He says, but when I would come to your house, you just treated me. And he told me the story. He said, remember that big bowl you had? Because all I wanted was cereal. So and I always gave the kids that came to our church, to our home, my wife and I, free reign. Here, this is where I'm not going to serve you food. So here's. I'm going to take a nap, or I'm going to do this. You guys can stay and do what you want to do the next 3 days. I don't care.
I love that.
But he said to me, I never saw a family. I never saw structure. And he says, I watched you raise your daughters, and I watched you and your wife. And he said, it showed me family. And I said, that's what I want.
Yeah, he found a place where he belonged.
He found a place. Now he has a master's degree, doing super well, and works in the nonprofit space now, and also the for-profit space and some different things. But the cool thing was I looked at these 4 kids, and I'm like, whoa. So all it took, like you said, just when God lays it in your heart, you just do what you do.
Being obedient.
Yeah, being obedient. You don't have an answer to every question.
Right.
Just be there. And
be willing.
And God does the rest. Little did I know that it'd be a generational impact.
Wow.
And his sisters are all doing great, all with families, married. It amazes me. And all we did was just say, we're going to the go-kart track today. You guys want to go?
Yeah, just invited them to be a part. It wasn't a teach me, which I'm sure that part was a part of it too, but it was a show me. And that he got to see what a family looked like.
It.
Okay, so I get the whole discipleship, taking the guys under their wings, future dads or dads. That is a holistically pro-life thing that we can do. Men and women to help take people under our wing. What other practical ways? Like if a guy was like, okay, yes, I'm already discipling someone, but what might be other ways that men could get involved in the movement? Do you have any thoughts? I will say one thing really quick. I know my husband, because I lead Embrace Grace, he was like, well, what can I do? And one time my husband's really good at budgeting, a little too good at budgeting, if you know what I mean. And we had a single mom was like, she doesn't have the best credit. She got a tote the note car with high interest rate because they sold her that. She didn't really ever have a dad that like taught her how to like find good deals on interest. She didn't understand all of that. But my husband is the best at that. And so I was like, okay, think about what strengths and gifts did God put inside of you, and what brings you joy? And he's like, I do love finances. Like he has a financial advisory certification, whatever. And he has an insurance agency. That's what he loves. And so I was like, there's a couple single moms that could really use some mentorship in this area. How about I bring him to the house and I'll sit with her, and you can teach her, and I'll learn some things too. in how, like, you can just look at her bank account and like see if you've got some tips on how to help her so that she's not like so surviving she's just trying to make it through the day and it's hard for her to dream. How can we help her with that? And he did so good at it, and gave her some tips on some future jobs that she could do right now that would help her get towards her dream. But that's like his strengths. Have you seen any other, like, within the church or people like getting involved with their strengths as men?
Yeah, I think your husband just knocked it out of the park. That is what we have to teach these men to do. Don't try to come in and be something that you're not.
Yeah,
Because
just be you.
Just be you, and just be holistic. I mean, somebody needs to do finances. Somebody else has to do a resume. Somebody wants to start a business.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Resume, start a business.
Whatever they can add value to the pro-life movement, because really it's stand for life, it's holistic life. I love I believe, if I get it right with your organization, I think what is it,
Pro love.
yeah,
That's my shirt. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pro life is a stance. Pro love is an
I
action.
love that, because that's what it is. And I think holistically, if we could just get people to work in the lane and the venue that God gave them.
Yeah.
You know, a couple things I started, actually during COVID, I saw the need. Number one, I started an organization called Godpreneurs. Godpreneurs.
Godpreneurs. Ooh.
Godpreneurs. And it helps young people. I started out with entrepreneurship, but then I realized some don't want to be entrepreneurs, but they want to enhance their skills to go to the next level of the occupation and or the area they work in. And that's one area. And to your point about credit, I'm starting a new plan right now. It's called the Road to 850. How do we take people who have had challenges with credit to get them to that perfect credit?
Right.
So these are the things like your husband is doing. These are the simple things we can do to impact the pro-life movement.
Yeah.
It's more than, getting out there and saying, I don't.
This is what I believe or whatever, which it's good to use our voice, but when we put the action behind it, that's where the magic happens.
Yeah, it could be anything. I tutor. I mean, whatever your gift is for the body, for these young men and these young women and the children, because it's going to make a generational impact either way, because that's the gift God gave you, and that's what God told you to do. And the example I use for people is in the Bible. There's a story about this we always say the battle is not yours, but the battle is the Lord's, Jehaziel. But that is the only time that guy ever spoke. He never spoke. He never said nothing. He just, that one time, and he changed the course of destiny for Israel.
Wow.
The battle is not yours, the battle is the Lord's. So I think I tell men, don't devalue or undervalue your contribution. It may be coming in after the Embrace Grace group and cleaning up.
Yeah.
And then you grab another couple of young guys or somebody else to do it with you. It teaches them service. It teaches them humility. So there's just whatever you do.
And Embrace Legacy, starting an Embrace Legacy group, which is a 12-week curriculum for young dads, like that sometimes can be the hook, like not the hook, but like to get them in the door to even open up the trust, like you were saying, like they are not sure they trust you all the way. But over the course of 12 weeks, they start to, and then it can develop into, an ongoing relationship. I notice I have one 24-year-old, a 20-year-old, and a 16-year-old, and then a little one. But those three teenagers and young 20s, all their friends, I notice that they say this all the time, that they're like, I need a mentor. They always say that. They say that word, which really it is discipleship. It's like going back to the basics of what the last thing Jesus said before he went to the cross, to go and make disciples. And doing that and walking alongside them, sometimes you have to help them with the practical first before they start opening their hearts to more of the gospel. You just have to be Holy Spirit led, right? There's not a cookie cutter way to help empower a young man or a young woman to make a life decision, but like listening to the Holy Spirit and what he's saying, what does this person need? And then introducing him to the rescuer.
Yeah, and you just triggered in one more thought with me, that as we talk about men, and in many churches, you have men that are pastors, and sometimes they feel, what can I do? I have a small church, I don't have the resources, I don't have this, I don't have that. You use what you have.
Yeah.
And so like, for example, I know at our church, for example, you got a baby shower coming, hey, here's a space. That
which is
alone,
huge.
It's huge. It's a load. Hey, I know it may sound small, but we just opened up our church, for example, to Little League. And they said, hey, just use the church for your meetings and things like that. Because now I'm realizing how
Tony Evans does that too. I love it.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
It was so funny because it all started with during COVID, this is a crazy story, and maybe I'm getting off subject. When I told our church that I'm going down the street in that 20-year dilapidated park we're getting ready to renovate, they thought I was insane and out of my mind. Until I took my rototill down and started rototilling the baseball field. But the point I'm making is I was looking for the first time, and I noticed one thing at the baseball games. And after 20 years, they're playing t-ball on that field. They have not played. But here's the thing. During that time, I met so many moms, single dads and single moms with children. And then I recognized many of them are out there playing and the struggles they have and things like that. But whatever you can do to impact that community, to show people that you care about their lives, that's what Stand for Life is. That's all you do.
Yeah.
So I encourage small churches. I encourage underserved churches and underserved areas. Just do whatever you can.
Yeah.
I know the biggest thing is always, I need money, but I really believe that God brings the increase. That's
Yeah.
what the Bible says. God
Yeah.
will bring the increase. Just do whatever it is. And,
Yeah, what's in your hand right now?
what's in your
and
hand?
What,
And there was a pastor in Detroit, Bishop Michael Hill. He preached a message, and that's what catapulted me during COVID. He said, I don't care if you got to make bologna sandwiches and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, cut them in half and do it.
yeah.
And I said, wow, he's right. So from that day forward, I didn't worry about anything. I just did. I'm like Nike, just do it.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, well, super quick, like practically, I'm thinking of a couple of random ideas that I've seen men use whatever strict, it might not be the mentorship, but I know there's a guy in Florida who he's like a really good networker, and he goes to all these churches in his community, even outside of his community, to make sure they know what the local pregnancy centers are. He helps make sure that they know that there's Embrace Grace and Embrace Life groups. He wants to help equip them to be pro-life in their way as a church, which is awesome. I've seen, I know we have a lot of single moms that struggle with not having a father figure for their child. And I know an adult single mom who said that when she was young, whenever it was donuts with dad, it was always this like, she would get so much anxiety because she didn't have a dad. And there was a pastor that stepped up, and he would just show up at the school.
Yeah.
And he would sit with this little girl or little boy and be that dad. And then he'd leave when it was over, but it meant the world to her. And then I know another guy who's a t-ball coach for like a little league in kind of a low income area. And there's a lot of single moms. And I know this single mom, and her little boy is about 5 or 6. And he looks at this coach as like a father figure. And this coach has showed up at some of his school stuff that's like dad stuff, even though like he just, he's married and has kids, but like he notices that these boys, they need a father figure. So that's another way that men, is like, how can you step in appropriately, and you can get, advice from your pastor, counsel from your pastor on what that looks like. But there's so many kids that need even just dad help, like how do you tie a tie, or how do you, change your tire on your car, there's so many ways too. And that helps empower a single mom, because if she's worried about not choosing life because there's not a dad figure, then having the church step in and said, we will fill all of those gaps, then that will help her feel more empowered in her life decision.
It will. And I find, in my experience as a pastor, the young men and or young women that even what I say, bridge the immediate thought of the not letting the child live, it's because of their social economic woes, or they're gonna wind up just like me. But I say no, they're gonna wind up like you. You're right, because you're gonna be here. And so I think that's a big issue. And I think once the church, and once we tell these men, hey, that basically we're going to walk with you. We're going to, like you just said, we're going to be there for you. And this happens, man. We're going to figure this out.
We are a family, and we're going to figure this out. I love that.
I love what you're saying about those things. That's great.
Yeah. And I just feel like, too, if anybody is watching on social media or wherever, like if you're a guy and you're like, I feel disqualified to be able to do that. Maybe it's because of the past. Maybe they've helped facilitate or pay for an abortion or something. I hear that a lot from men too. Like, who am I when I did this? But you know, Revelation 12:11 says we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. So sharing our story and mentoring these guys and saying, this is what I went through and I don't want this for you.
Yeah.
This is what God taught me and this is how God heals, makes a huge difference. But God qualifies us and God qualifies these men. We need more men in the movement for sure. As a woman, I say, yes, we need more men. And I'm sure you feel the same way.
Yes.
Yeah. You see the need.
Yeah, we need men just to step up, and it's okay to say, I choose life. I choose child life. I choose love, and I'm going to be an advocate for that. And there's nothing ashamed of it. And I'm bold about it. I'm never going to change my
Do it.
I'm going to bold about it. And if a young lady has had an abortion or a young man has been a part of one, hey, I'm going to love you just the same. We're going to love you back.
The church is a safe place for you to come to as well. Healing groups and yeah, for sure.
Yeah, they feel shamed, and I don't want them to feel shamed because we all have sinned and come short. So, you know, and my wife and I talk about it, and I know our time is winding up, but you know, our daughter, we have a daughter that was pregnant at 17 in high school, and this is the story that, and we talked, because she knows she was raised in a Christian home, and when she became pregnant, she didn't tell us at first, and when she finally did tell us, later on she told me, she says, Dad, I won't lie to you, abortion crossed my mind because I didn't want to embarrass you and Mom. She says, but the values you put in me caused me to make this decision. And so I was asking the Lord, how do I deal with this? Because I want to make sure, I know I love my daughter. I'm not going to go out there and make her the scarlet letter. I'm going to walk with her. And she didn't want to go to prom because she was pregnant. And I remember that. And so I took her to dinner. We did her own prom. I'll never forget that. And her and I went to dinner, and I was her date.
Oh.
She didn't want to go to the big prom dance. She was embarrassed. I said, okay, but she did go to graduation. But this was the thing. I asked the Lord something, and God said this to me. He says, she went on to college, and the Lord said to me this, because she was debating on whether or not she could go to college. So I says, no, you're going to finish your dreams. And I went down to the University of Detroit. I enrolled her, put her in the dorm, and I said, me and your mom are going to take care of this baby. And this is what God said. He said, it's like riding a horse. She was on the horse the first time, and she fell. He says, but if you don't get her back on that horse, she'll never ride again.
Oh, that's good.
And so sometimes people that have made mistakes, you have to encourage them to get back on the horse. You may fall again.
Yeah.
But if you don't get on the horse, you're going to be so fearful you will never ride again, and you'll live the rest of your life in fear. That young lady, first year, her testimony is very simple. She actually flunked out. She just couldn't cope with the pressure. She still finished college in 4 years.
Wow.
She had to repeat the whole first year. She amazes me. She finished at the University of Detroit. She went on she says, I don't think I want to do this. I think I'm going to be a paramedic. So she went to be a paramedic. Nah, I don't think I want to do that either. And she went back to the healthcare field. Now she's a nurse.
Wow.
Living in Florida. So, and I say that because as a pastor and as a dad, we had to deal with this. And we just loved her to life.
Yeah.
That little girl, Brooklyn.
Loved her to life. That's so good.
You know, so you love her to life. And so I have to encourage people that if you've had these issues, it's okay.
Yeah.
We all have made mistakes. We all got it. We all got baggage. But you have to get back on the horse.
Yes.
That's what the Lord said to me.
That's so good. Hey, that's a word for somebody.
Yeah.
That's a word for somebody today. Well, thank you so much for just even talking about this and being bold
Thank you.
with your stance, but not just your stance, but the action behind it, and empowering your people and the people that are at your church and the people that are in life to be bold and find their place in the movement, find their place in how they can help serve these single moms and dads. So
And you know,
I appreciate it.
I want to just say this. You have one of the most amazing ministries with Embrace Grace.
Thank you.
And it has blessed my heart. It's blessing our church. And I'm just in awe about what God's already done through you. And I think the Embrace Legacy pivot was so amazing with these men. And I'm just following that pivot. And, you know, we started out really focusing on this Embrace Grace with these young women, but these young men keep piling in. And
That's amazing. If we have more dads in the world, we could change the world.
That's what we're looking
so
to do.
good.
Thank you for what you do.
Thank you
so much.